I hired an investigator and discovered that my husband was unfaithful, attending inappropriate parties, and sharing content online. He now pleads with me to return or threatens to marry the other woman. My husband is 47, and I am 44. We have been married for just over 10 years, and although I have had concerns, our marriage has generally been loving and focused on our two wonderful children. He travels frequently for work, is always on his phone, and occasionally leaves abruptly for errands that have always seemed questionable. I always felt that voicing my concerns about his work, phone, computer, and sudden emergencies would be selfish, considering all he provides for us. But 2 weeks ago, I started to feel overwhelmed by these issues. He has a demanding job that allowed us a lifestyle I never imagined possible, meaning I could leave work to focus on the kids, take amazing holidays, and provide them a great education. But I became suspicious after finding a condom in his blazer's inner pocket. Since our intimate life has been mostly confined to home, and less frequent than it used to be, this discovery pushed me to do something I never thought I would. I checked his phone when he wasn't looking. I didn't know what I was hoping to find. I looked at his photos first. Nothing. Then, I checked WhatsApp and Telegram. Both were locked with passwords, which seemed strange. At that point, there wasn't much there. I remembered a friend of mine who used a digital investigator when facing a similar situation. Her fiancé had a whole second life, including a long-term girlfriend in Edinburgh and a business she never knew about. Inspired by that, I contacted the same investigator to look into my husband. The investigator spent about a week gathering information before sending me a report that changed everything. They warned me that the contents would be deeply upsetting. What I found out was devastating. My husband of more than 10 years had 1. Been involved with a woman for 15 years, 2. Was financially supporting her and her failed business, and 3. Was attending adult-themed parties with her. Since reading that report, I've barely eaten, slept, or functioned properly. I haven't spoken to him because he's so distracted. He hasn't even noticed that something is wrong. I don't know what to do next, whether to confront him directly or speak to a lawyer first. Divorce feels like the obvious route, but our children are only 7 and 9. To make matters worse, it was revealed that this woman and others have shared content and explicit discussions in inappropriate online spaces, including images and personal commentary involving my husband's unhealthy habits. I've loved this man since we met 14 years ago, and despite everything, I believe I've always held a special place in his heart. If he truly commits to treatment, maybe there is a way to heal from this. But right now, I'm shattered and not ready to speak about it face to face. Update 1, February 2025. First, I want to thank everyone who left kind messages or supportive comments. I'm sorry I disappeared for a while, but I hope this update explains why. I decided to wait until after the holidays, New Year's especially, because I didn't want to take that time away from the kids. In the meantime, I looked up solicitors and got recommendations from friends I trust. Yes, I finally did it, partially thanks to all the encouragement here. I also scheduled and completed an STI test. It was deeply uncomfortable, but I'm relieved to say everything came back negative. I honestly don't know how I would have handled it if I'd been affected health-wise due to his actions. When he left on a work trip, I took action. I met with the solicitor, packed all of his things into 6 suitcases, had the locks changed, and arranged for the kids to stay with my mother after school. When he returned, I met him at the door with divorce papers and his belongings. I printed the entire report and walked him through it. He broke down in tears, claiming he was overwhelmed and couldn't cope if I left him. That comment felt incredibly manipulative, and it was the last straw. After hours of back and forth, he gave up and sat at the bottom of the stairs while waiting for a cab. He left, and I have no idea where he went. The legal process is still ahead. Unfortunately, the court might not weigh his behavior heavily when dividing assets, but I have confidence in my lawyer. My goal is to keep the home and give the kids stability. I still feel deeply hurt, and I'm not sure I'll ever love or trust the same way again. Some people messaged me, blaming our lack of intimacy or saying I shouldn't be upset because he provided a certain lifestyle. That mindset is extremely hurtful. Our intimacy issues were not entirely my fault. He often voiced frustrations, too. But more importantly, no lifestyle justifies betrayal and emotional harm. Update 2, February 2025. I never thought a single Reddit post could change my life this much. I'm incredibly grateful to everyone who supported me. Your encouragement, honesty, and guidance gave me the strength I didn't know I had. Just because someone provides for you doesn't give them the right to treat you without honesty or respect. Since my last update, I've continued adjusting to a new reality. Legal matters are ongoing, and while things might get complicated, I'm holding firm. I want a future where I can make choices for myself and give my children the life they deserve. If I missed any messages or comments, I want to say thank you again. Some of the investigator's findings may benefit my case emotionally, even if not financially. This betrayal has been painful beyond words, but I'm no longer bound to someone who deceived me so profoundly. It's hard to accept that infidelity may not affect the asset split, but I won't let that stop me from fighting for what's fair. I now understand that his choices were never a reflection of my worth. I wasn't lacking. He failed in his commitment. Since our separation, my husband has gone back and forth, remorseful one moment, blaming me the next. He tries to rewrite history, painting himself as the victim while ignoring the reality of what he did. He even suggested we remain partners, but live separate lives. A clear attempt to have it both ways. He's blamed it on stress, mental health, and even claimed he wants therapy. Then he lashes out, accusing me of ruining his life and taking away his stability with the kids. It's exhausting. He's contacted mutual friends trying to twist the story. I've had to establish clear boundaries. I don't owe him anything. The man I believed I married no longer exists, if he ever truly did. Thank you all for helping me see that when I began to doubt myself. He currently has supervised visits while we sort out custody. The kids are adjusting, and I'm doing everything I can to maintain their stability. As for me, I'm slowly healing. I've reconnected with old friends and found moments of strength I didn't know I had. Love still feels like a distant and fragile idea, but I now believe I'll rebuild it in time. This is the final update. I'm closing this chapter. If you're in a similar situation, trust your gut. Don't let anyone convince you that your instincts are wrong. If you're unsure, get proof. Use an investigator, gather evidence, and protect yourself. Most importantly, betrayal does not define you. Your healing does. My husband's family threw me out at Christmas because they disliked me, and that led to our divorce. Later, I discovered they had been misusing our rent money, and I'm now pursuing legal action against them. I married my husband is 33 in 2018, and his family never truly accepted me. They claimed their behavior was just a tough exterior, and that I'd eventually be welcomed. To illustrate their treatment of me, I once brought a homemade cake to dinner as a gesture of thanks. His mother took it, walked to the bin, and threw it out, handing the plate back to me. When I told my husband, he confronted her, and she claimed it was an accident, saying I let go too quickly. But my sister-in-law admitted the action was deliberate. They called me a gold digger behind my back. Naturally, they insisted on a prenuptial agreement. I agreed, never imagining the marriage would end and foolishly thinking it would win me some goodwill. When the pandemic hit, my husband's business collapsed. We used both our savings, but I refused to go into debt to save it, so he closed it down in 2022. He fell into depression and suggested we move to his hometown, closer to family for support. Reluctantly, I agreed. He worked part-time while trying to rebuild his business. I became the primary earner and bought gifts for his family, hoping to earn their approval. I thought thoughtful, generous gifts would finally show them I truly wanted to be accepted. When I visited in early December, they were finalizing plans for Christmas. A few days later, my STBX said his family decided they didn't want me to join them for Christmas Eve dinner and Christmas lunch because I ruined the family vibe. I replied, okay, we'll do our best. But for my STBX, every holiday was spent with them, with monthly dinners with the entire family. After a year, I realized that if I ever tried to talk or join a conversation, everyone would become quiet, so I simply stopped talking. Own thing, but my STBX sheepishly turned away and said he was still going to go. I was furious and extremely disappointed in him, so I returned the gifts I had purchased for his family to their location. I got Phil a pair of novelty business socks, a bottle of shampoo from a supermarket brand, and the most budget-friendly perfume I could find at the dollar store. The most costly gift was a large rawhide bone for Bill and his wife's chihuahua, but it was too big for it to get. When my husband came home from Christmas lunch, he told me that I had embarrassed him in front of his family. I asked him why he thought I would buy thoughtful gifts for people who clearly don't like me and don't want me around. He filed for divorce last week, remembering how he was supposed to be a millionaire by now. As a result, we had that PRUP STBX, which is not eligible for any of my savings, keep separate accounts or alimony. He doesn't have money for rent or auto insurance, and some of my friends and family are on my side and proud that I went out in a blaze of glory. Others are saying that I was being far too petty, which isn't me. So I would say, be glad you didn't have children with him. Be glad you can escape and be free with no strings. P.S. The commenter's response was, be glad you didn't have children with him. Be glad you can escape and be free. You're not old, silly, so I'm glad you're enjoying the company of an older cat. The cat is interesting, but not as someone who appreciates you and will demonstrate that far more than STBX ever did. The first thing I did after moving into my new apartment was adopt an older cat from the shelter. He was allergic, and I could never adopt one since we started living together. We're just two old companions living our best lives after being rejected. Observe the typo more than keeping it in because it's hilarious. He chose his family over you and still expected you to buy all the gifts. This was well planned and well deserved for everyone, including him. Oh, he only worked 12 hours a week at Walmart so he could do non-existent work and restart his business. I make just over 6 figures, and I can't believe I didn't realize years ago that I was the family ATM. Commenter, NTA. Of them to demand a prenuptial agreement. I hope you send them a heartfelt thank you note once the divorce is finalized. My lawyer even chuckled at the prenup, which is what we'll use for me. It stipulated that each spouse could keep all of their savings in separate bank accounts, and that neither spouse would be eligible for alimony. Update 1, February 6, 2025. Many, thanks to everyone for their support in my previous post. I thought I'd send a brief update first for those who asked. My STBX didn't bother contacting me after I left until he was served the divorce papers, and my lawyer made it clear we're exercising the PRUP. Thereafter, I received loving voicemails and texts from him and his family for a few days, trying to persuade me to return, but eventually, they turned into harsh and threatening voicemails. I was asked how the deposit on my new apartment was only the $600 I had saved on the gifts, which it wasn't. I had to draw from my savings. The messages continued when it was obvious that I wasn't going to back down, so my lawyer advised me not to block them so we have proof of harassment if necessary, essentially giving them the rope to tie their case. However, last night, I foolishly answered a series of calls from my STBX, thinking there was an emergency or something, and I barely managed to say hello when he said the rent was a little late. I told him that was odd because I had paid my landlord 6 days prior, and he paused, let out a dramatic sigh, and said, "No, the rent since the apartment is in his parents' names, I'm not concerned about having an eviction on my record. When we first announced we were moving to his hometown, they rented an apartment for us right away so we could move in quickly. They've been renewing the lease every year, and each time, we have to pay his parents, after which they write a check to the landlord, who will collect the remaining amount owed. I reminded him that I don't live there, and that he shouldn't expect rent. I'm glad I had a few weeks to prepare for my departure because they would have likely used the fact that it's their apartment to ask me to leave immediately. Divorce is likely to be a difficult journey with this emotionally immature man and his difficult parents. Any advice from anyone who has been through it is welcome." Update 2, February 19th, 2025. I apologize if I'm bothering members who aren't interested, but a few asked for an update. So this is for the people who did. My lawyer sent a formal request to their lawyer for a copy of the lease, which I have never seen, after my soon-to-be ex-in-laws remarked that they were likely charging my STBX and me more than the amount on the lease, you called it, and that we wouldn't have discovered it if they weren't so entitled and intent on causing harm. They had a cousin who works as a lawyer send me a letter threatening to sue me unless I paid the remaining balance on the lease. My mother-in-law and father-in-law had been charging us an additional $200 per month, so we informed the landlord that I'd been living there with my STBX, and that the leases were living in their house for the duration of the lease. They also sent us a copy of their written agreement with us, which is a sublease, which doesn't exist. They also insisted that the sublease agreement was a verbal contract. The address, along with more than 2 years' worth of bank and credit card statements that include the address, was served with a 30-day eviction yesterday. I am aware of this because my MIL left a voicemail stating that I had kicked my ex out of his house, and that she now drives with a baseball bat in her car and will be watching me closely. My lawyer's area of expertise is family law, so she referred me to a colleague who specializes in real estate law. We met today to create a strategy, and he's not sure how a judge will view it. It's well over my state's civil compensation limit, but he's confident it will encourage them to settle by just returning the extra $200 from each payment. That's why I'm now suing MIL and Fail for all the money I can prove I transferred for rent for the entire residency there, because the apartment was technically not a legal apartment to rent, and they couldn't sublease without the proper documentation. There is no news on my STBX, and since he won't agree to the financial details of the separation agreement my lawyer drafted, we will probably need to go to family court for a separation order. I believe it is fair because I did live there with my STBX, so I don't think it's appropriate to get all the rent money back. I'm an adult, and adults pay rent, and I don't want them to feel like I'm using the divorce for financial gain. On the STBX front, I don't know if he simply fell out of love but found me financially convenient, if the mask finally slipped, or if being so close to his family gave them chances to influence him. I don't know, and I don't care. I don't need closure. I need them all out of my life. Divorce can't be finalized yet, so this is going to be a long process. A few people asked why he did what he did, And if he's offered any kind of explanation or justification, we haven't spoken since he was served. Knowing that he let his family treat me poorly for so long is closure enough, as is the final betrayal. At Christmas, my attention is on making sure I'm happy, not on figuring it out. He made promises throughout couples counseling and is gradually slipping back into old patterns.